Hi, everyone. Welcome to MustardHub Voices from the Frontlines. Here's where we talk with the leaders who roll up their sleeves and support and engage their teams from all sorts of industries and verticals, from healthcare to hospitality, retail to the trades. Here's where we dive into the real stories and real strategies from the people who make it happen every day. I'm your host, Julie Wald, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Dave Cuff today. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Julie, how are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Excited to chat.
I am excited to chat too. So, I guess, to kick things off, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself, the organization you work for, what you do, lay it on us.
All the good stuff. Yeah, would be happy to. So currently I'm the chief of staff for a company called Loving, which is a production-based landscape and sod farm business. Crazy to think that I'm even in this industry. Nowhere near was it on the career path that I was on. But basically what I do kind of sitting in the seat, it's an integrator role. So work very closely with the founder and the CEO and work with the leadership team to make sure we're making the right decisions. We're pulling the business in the right way, right people, right seats, all that good stuff.
So, I'm curious, how long have you been with the company?
So I actually just crossed my 12-month mark. I started on
Congratulations.
board with them really as a consultant last December. Met them through a former colleague, and came on board with them as a consultant for about 2 months, and then joined full time, really going into March. So yeah, it's been an official year.
No, that's really exciting. And so, what brought you into just the space in general? What was the career path, and how did you end up where you are?
I'd say my career journey has definitely been not normal. I spent 10 years in the pharmaceutical world, and I ultimately thought that's where my career was going to take me. And I worked through the pharmaceutical sales rep, the management, the training, and all of that. And back in 2016, I got a random call from a close friend of mine, Landon Eccles, who he and I had worked together in the pharmaceutical world. And he said, "Hey, we're going to franchise Clean Juice. Do you want to move to Charlotte and help?" At that time, I knew nothing about franchising, but thought about it, prayed about it for a few days, and up and walked away from a 10-year pharmaceutical career to start something brand new. Moved our family about 4 hours inland from the coast of North Carolina into Charlotte. Spent 7 years really growing that Clean Juice brand. Started with 2 locations. We ended with about a 250 unit brand. That business sold. I guess it's been about 2 years ago now. And when the business sold, obviously you have ownership change, and, kind of the group who came in, they had one plan, and I thought it was really time for me to really move on. So as I started looking for kind of my next opportunity, I really wanted to be able to focus on being in a seat that allows me to work with multiple departments. I spent the majority of my career with Clean Juice really in development. So how do you get locations sold and opened, and construction and real estate? And I wanted to be able to touch multiple departments. So kind of through that, I met the founder of another emerging brand called Hoppin, Hoppin, which is a self-pour wine and beer tap room. And I spent almost a year with them, really starting to build the franchise kind of business. And ultimately, they decided to really slow down on the franchising side of things and just focus on the corporate locations. So I'd call it probably last October. So I really started looking for what is that next opportunity? What's that next role that I can really dive in and make an impact? And sure enough, and this is where it comes a full circle moment. So Landon became an EOS implementer. And one of his clients that he was working with was looking for someone to really sit in that integrator seat, who can really partner with the founder and get each individual kind of leader moving in the right direction. And he called me one day and said, "Hey, what do you know about sod farming and landscaping?" And I said, "You've known me for 20 years. Not a whole lot." But I had a chance to sit down with the founder, and he and I talked a few times, probably last October, November. And man, just amazing company. He's an amazing guy. He started this landscaping business at 17, and turned it into this multi-million-dollar company through different avenues. And, he's got a great guy, wears his heart on his sleeve, and really needed someone to kind of come and support him on the leadership side. So again, I've been there, about 12 months. We've made a ton of changes within the organization over the last 12 months. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, hey, you're going to be in production landscaping and sod farming, I would have said you're absolutely crazy. I knew nothing about it, but yet, here I am and absolutely loving, loving what I'm doing.
I love that you're loving it. My follow-up though is, so now you're a year in. How
Yep.
do you feel about your expertise in landscaping and sod farming?
I'll say my technical knowledge of kind of what our frontline team members do, I'll say, is still limited. And there's a lot of various things that are different in production landscaping than kind of just a normal small landscaping business. What I will say is it's a large company. We have about 120 to 130 employees, and what I'd say I've been challenged with the most, just from a leadership perspective, is that concept of right person, right seat, and getting the structure of the organization right. We spent probably the first 3 or 4 months when I was in this role just trying to understand, are the people in the seats that they're in of the organization because it's right for the organization? Or are they there because they've been with the company for so long and it just seemed to make sense, where they were the next man or woman up to kind of fill that role? And ultimately, what we've really found was the way the company was positioned 12 months ago was not the right people. It was not the right seat. It was not the right structure of kind of who owned what. And we spent probably 6 months trying to put a square peg in a round hole until we got to that point of saying, okay, this isn't working. We got to make some changes. So the technical side of landscaping and sod farming, I'm still learning, every day, but definitely learning a lot about just the leadership and how to work with a group of this many people. When we were at Clean Juice, I think at most we probably had maybe 20 to 30 employees, that worked for us, and now to jump up to a company that's doing, over 20 million in revenue and 120 employees, completely different. So just having very clear priorities and rocks and scorecards is just a game changer. Otherwise you get lost in the weeds and, you get really, really busy, but you don't accomplish anything.
Yeah, no, that's really true. It sounds though like you're getting a very good handle on everything, and this organization, especially with that shift in size. And I feel very confident that you will be driving around your neighborhood someday in the near future and be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe they did that." Like, "Oh my god."
I think it's I think some days, yes. I mean, there are days where I feel very confident of what we're doing, the thing, the processes we're
Yeah.
creating. And then I'll wake up another day and it's like just getting smacked right in the mouth, where it's like, oh no, that doesn't work. And I think it's true in any leadership role, but when you have to believe in your process, but then you also have to have the patience to see, number one, is it the right process? Is it the right person for that process? Right? You could have the right process, but the wrong person. You could have the right person, but you don't have the right process aligned. And I think that's been probably the biggest thing that I've it's been a challenge this year. If you know anything about the culture index,
Mhm.
my C, which is your pace or your patience, is all the way to the left, meaning I don't really have any. So when you have an organization it's this size, you can make decisions pretty quickly based on where you need the company to go. But being able to take a step back and say, okay, did we give it the right time to see, is it right, is it wrong, before making a change? Because you don't want to do the knee jerk reactions. But you also, if you know it's not right, you got to be able to make that change versus keeping someone in a seat that, maybe we know they're not right for.
And one of the things, I'm happy you mentioned Landon. So Landon Eccles, we had him on an episode of our other series, Behind the Build, quite a while ago. And by quite a while ago, we've only been running the show for like 6 months, so not that long, not that long. Um, but EOS implementation, like as an EOS implementer, and the people that have tapped into EOS, you get so much great clarity and you get so many great insights, especially as you're talking around these operations and finding the right fit. Like, I feel like that's something that can be really enlightening. for a
You
lot of
know,
organizations.
it is. And what I'll say, and what has taught me this year, is, implementing EOS and having an implementer is absolutely huge. But first and foremost is your leadership team has to buy into it. If they don't, it's just another tool. And even more so, I'll say when we first launched EOS with Loving. So I came in and started, I think Landon had one or two meetings with them. So I was at the beginning of it. Ultimately, we were probably in maybe March or April or sometime in the spring. And we were rolling with EOS and we had our L10s, we had our scorecards, we had our rocks. But the trap that we fell into was, we would go through our L10s. And if something was off track, it was simply, oh, off track, off track, off track. So we would go weeks at a time with the data we thought was critical to our business being red, and if you're someone like me, when you see red, it's like a thorn in your side. But just from a leadership perspective, again, this goes back to having the wrong people in the wrong seats. Myself and our founder, we were trying to drive the business at such a in the weeds type of level because we weren't getting the results that we needed to. So ultimately we were having all these meetings, we were having, all this dashboard and all of this data, but our outcomes at the end of the month were still crap. So we went through a phase this summer where we basically stopped EOS because we had to really press pause on understanding and saying, listen, what we have been doing, it's not working. We still believe in EOS. We still believe in the process, but we got to get our hands more wrapped around some firefighting. We got to make sure we have the right people and go back through all of that. And it's really only up until probably maybe 2 months ago, end of Q3, beginning of Q4, where we really started to re-engage with it. And we're re-engaging at a level of not going all in. So we started with our new executive meeting. So we figured out kind of what that looks like. But we started with just issues. We didn't start with our rocks. We didn't start with our scorecards. We really started to kind of ease back into it. And what we're doing now that we have our executive team put together is we're now setting the scorecards for our leadership teams moving forward. So we'll be able to use the software. And Julie, you hit the nail on the head when you say clarity. When this is done right, the clarity is what is so critical. It's not a subjective, well, I feel like I did well today. No, it's, hey, your number says this. Did you hit it or not? And I'll say the second go around for us as an executive team is if you're more than 2 weeks in a row of I am off track, all right, that's going to the issues list. We're not going to just assume you've got it. We're going to press in and figure out how do we fix this? And that with, there was probably 9 or 10 people on the leadership team when I first started. So again, the meetings just got into this off track, off track, off track. Okay, next person, off track, off track, off track. And we were just checking the boxes. And that made a spiral for a little bit. So it was a lot of ups and downs, really getting to just where we are, now a year later.
Yeah, and you said something that's really important is like, it's a tool. If you don't use the tool or you don't use it correctly, you're not going to get the benefits. And I think whether it is processes or systems and having procedures, or it could be a tech tool, a platform, software, if you only get out of it what you put in,
Right.
if you don't use it, it's not going to happen. If you're just checking the boxes, I always kind of liken it to like actual tools. Like
Yeah.
if you own a hammer and it's sitting in your toolbox, that photo isn't going to get hung up because you're not using the hammer. If you go to hang up the photo and you start banging it into it with the claw, you're also not going to be successful at hanging it up. And if you are trying to hang up that picture and you come out with a snake for plumbing, you can't do it. It's like you have to pick the right things, and just flailing the hammer in the general direction without
Yeah.
thinking about it or looking also does it. Like you actually have to take that time and use these tools and invest, because otherwise, especially if you think for smaller and growing organizations, of course, most organizations, most companies don't have infinite money, but if you're investing a lot of time in these tools and if you're investing in training for them and you're signing contracts, like this can eat up a lot of capital that could be spent in other ways.
A
Um,
100%. And it was probably midsummer, and our founder, he made this statement that it stuck with me, because we started having this conversation of we're using this data, but again, the outcomes we're getting, the financial outcomes that
mhm.
we're getting at the end of the month are just, they're bad. They're not where we want to be. He said, with all this data that we have, he said, it's like we're playing a basketball game without the scoreboard turned on, and we're
Yes.
doing all of this stuff, but we don't know, is the stuff we're doing going to lead to what is
No.
most important in our business, right? And that's being able to drive profits, right? Because with profits, you can take care of your team members, you can give more to your outreach partners, but you
Mhm.
got to have those profits. So, when we really started trying to look through the lens of okay, does this help us get to where we need to be? And man, I will tell you, that is so hard when my brain and how I'm wired is, if there's an issue, if there's a fire, my initial brain is, how can I dive in and how can I help? Well, if you're a part of a leadership team, right, you need to be able to take a step back and figure out, how do you make sure your team has all the right tools in place to go and solve that problem? And our founder Mike and I were wired the same, so we spent a lot of time this summer just really diving into the weeds, where we should have probably been focusing on, do we have the right people? Do we have the right processes? And a lot of that was hard.
Mhm.
The average tenure with people who work for Loving is 5 years or more.
Oh.
So, there's a lot of great employees. And one of the challenges is just, they kind of rose up through the ranks, but they weren't the right people to be in director, vice president, C-suite type roles. And all you had was years and years of, instead of solving problems at the root cause, it was band-aids. So years of band-aid fixes, and then got us to, well, when we create a work order, you should touch it once. Well, our team was touching it 10, 15 times because of all these kind of workarounds.
Mhm.
So, you learn, but again, it's the tools of, figure out what works, figure out what doesn't. And, when I first started, I was very rigid. EOS has to be this way. We have to do this. We have to do this. We have to do this. And really what I've learned is we have to find a way for the systems to really work for us. Otherwise, we're just putting in data that is not going to help us run the business. And that was something I think was hard for me to wrap my head around of, okay, when you talk to any EOS implementer, talk to Landon, he'll say, hey, you got to follow this process. And I do believe that there's a rhyme and a reason to how we do it. But we also have to make sure that process is serving us to get the outcomes that we need.
You know, it's really, yeah, having, when you think of leadership, there are a lot of folks, and I think that this perception is changing a lot. But I mean, there's, of course, these generational shifts in the multi-generational workforce.
Yeah,
There was, the generations where it's like, okay, well, I put in my time, so of course I'm going to make more money, of course I'm going to get to the next level, really, regardless of fit or not. But you would see organizations, have, the cliched, completely unqualified middle manager who has
yeah,
no idea what the heck is going on. But they probably bluster and yell at people and do all the other things that create employee dissatisfaction, disengagement, because they don't know what the hell they're doing.
that's right.
You know, they also, training there too, it's, they need to really understand what it means to be a leader, and then back to generationally, there's a lot of younger folks that are coming into the workforce or have been in the workforce, they're coming out of, or they're doing entry level roles. Really sharp people could be really great leaders, but there is an expectation of a lot of folks now that they're just going to be jumping right into that. And it's like,
That's
no,
right.
you really have to learn what it's like to be a leader. Just because you're really, really good at something doesn't mean that you're ready to lead other people doing
Yeah.
that.
And I'll say that was something with, with the levels, the amount of levels that our organization has, especially when I came in, it's 130 people. So you've got your C-suite, you've got your VPs, you've got your directors, you've got your managers. And ultimately what happened was, when I think of leadership, I don't care about a title, right? It's a title's a title. If you have someone who reports to you in an organization, you are in a leadership role. And, part of one of the challenges we've had this year is how are we creating that middle layer managers to be successful? I truly believe that people leave bosses, they don't leave companies. Um, and I think ultimately, if we're not focused on our VP level and how they are treating, coaching, mentoring their managers underneath them, we're missing that. So that was one of the biggest things really that we've missed is, we haven't had that career growth platform of, okay, I've got a director of logistics who has a logistics manager under her. But when I first asked him, hey, what are her goals? What does she want to do? How do you know you're going to help her kind of grow in her organization? He's like, well, I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. Okay, well, okay. So he was put into this director level role simply because he was kind of the next man up.
Mhm.
I brought on a chief people officer, probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and she has been an absolute rock star. And one of the things she's passionate about is that career development plan. So, and I think this is where having the right people around you is so critical, where I know how important it is to be able to develop other leaders. And it would take me a while for me to create like that career path of different levels and what you have to do to get to this level. But with her, that's what she
Yeah.
loves to do, right? So she can put together something pretty quickly. And now all of a sudden, within 30 days, we can go to any of our employees and say, hey, what do you want to do? Here's your pathway. And then we can kind of coach to that level. And now we're creating that next kind of bucket of leaders. And it's, the organization was so bogged down with so many people. We've had to let go of
Mm.
quite a few people this year, whether it was need of the business or just the wrong fit from a culture standpoint. On our one of our departments, we let go of almost 50% of the entire department, and those who are left are doing better work now than they were before. So it was just bogged down of this too many layers, too much management, where if you let people who are really passionate, who want to learn, who have the right culture, give them clarity on, hey, do you think you can do this? Let them see what they can do. And they're kicking butt, taking names, and it's
Yeah.
with less manpower.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. It's, not only not bogging down, but if you are in a role and you have clarity about what you do, if you want to advance, what the path is, what needs to happen, what do I need to learn, what skills do I have? Are there these, you have it defined, are there these opportunities? Can I grow?
That's right.
If you're, and do you have engaged, competent leadership? Because that's going to make engaged, competent team members down the chain. Like it's amazing because you are going to have so much better retention. You have so much better productivity. You have more loyalty, and even better, you have the people that when you're like, oh, we need to hire, that are like, I'm going to recommend someone because this is such a great place to work, and they are going to love it, and they are going to be a rock star just like me.
100%. And the challenge in that is I don't think you'll find anyone in business who says that's not important.
Yeah.
The challenge is then how do you execute it? And obviously the larger an organization, the harder it is, because it's for every time that, whether it's myself, our founder, our chief people officer, anytime we have to jump in a fire of the day-to-day business, well, that takes our time, energy, brain power away from the bigger strategic things of creating these type of opportunities. So
Yeah.
again, it comes down to people and making sure you have the right people in the right roles who know exactly what they need to do.
Yeah, and once you get these people, it's also, I think, intentionality, about being like, aligning with what people actually want and need, whether that is working conditions and hours, benefits and rewards, like what actually is motivating these folks and what actually is,
That's right.
important to them. If you again, multi-generational workforce, you know, maybe the thing that's going to be a big hook for people, if you have employees on the older end, they might be like, oh my God, I really need to worry about health insurance. I need to worry about retirement savings because it's all around the corner for me and I really need this. But if you offer childcare, for instance, they're going to be like, my kids are in
What?
their 30s. What are you,
Yeah. Yeah.
what am I doing with this? On the other end of the spectrum, younger folks who are joining the workforce, they're like, I don't have kids. I'm still my parents' health insurance. Why, like, can you send me to the gym? Can we have better snacks? And it's really, being able to take a temperature and like
Yeah.
understand that, you also being intentional and also understanding, I think, that your workforce isn't this amalgamous mix
It
of the
really, I mean,
same.
it really is different, and it's everything from the work from home. So we
Mhm.
do a hybrid. Mondays
Okay.
and Fridays we work from home. Tuesdays, Wednesday, Thursdays we're in the office. And you have some people who absolutely love it. You have others who just have to be in the office to get stuff done. So working through just how do we become effective as a team and move
Mhm.
in the right direction. And you hit the nail on the head again, where things that are important are different based on the individual. I had someone, a director when we were at Clean Juice, who his number one focus was PTO.
Mm.
It wasn't getting an increase. It wasn't a bonus. It was he wanted to be able to have more PTO days because he liked to go on long trips with his family. So that's what was
Yeah.
important to him. And I think when you use that word intentional, when you're intentional with your team, I mean, you can move mountains for them, because if you can give one person who is in a leadership role, show them the path, help them get there, and actually see it through. I mean, you've just got someone who's going to run through a brick wall for you because you've helped them. Again, I go back to the challenge in all of that is the execution of it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the right people in the right seats, well, now it's you're trying to focus and making sure everyone else is doing their jobs. If they don't have the right scorecards, if they don't
Mm.
have the right metrics, if all they're doing is firefighting every day, and I think that's kind of business leadership in a
Yeah.
nutshell, is how do you make sure you're intentional with your time, intentional with your people, to focus on the big stuff for what is important in your seat. What's
Yeah.
important in my seat is different than what is important in one of the VP seats. We focus on different things. One is not better or more important than the other, but if I'm focused on the same thing that they're focused on, well, now I'm going to miss some stuff. So it just comes back to the right people and having clarity on what do they need to do.
Yeah. And one of the things too, even with that, like you talked about data earlier, there's so many things, even things you might not think about, that you can actually get data and metrics behind, and making those choices again, intent with, intentionality. You're able to start seeing like, okay, well, the numbers are actually telling me this, that if we do this, people stick around more. If we do this, we have greater output,
Mhm.
and it could be, if we do this, we make more money, which is usually the important one at the end of the day. Sorry, everyone else. That's kind of what business is. Um, but like, this stuff, and it's you
Uh,
can get this good data if you don't look at, like, I've seen a lot of people collect a bunch of data and then they don't use it, or knowing what to look for, because there's a lot of things that you know maybe more of vanity metrics, or things that are really early down whatever
yeah.
pipeline we're working at, and that they're so focused, like, look, there's really big numbers here, and it's like, well, that's really cool, but what happens when we get here? What are these, what are the outcomes? And you can
So
also then, what the
and
heck am I doing wrong? Where are we
yeah, and
failing?
it's funny you mentioned the vanity metrics. So I would say and even now the loving is not short on data. We
Mhm.
have data for every possible metric that you could possibly imagine. But again, you look into, are we looking at what moves the needle for the business? And for I'd say probably the first 4 or 5 months, what I realized is the departments are so siloed that no one is talking to one another. So I had our internal operations department was pulling all of these reports. So they're spending hours upon hours every day, and they're pulling these reports where they thought in their mind the one of the operators is using it, even had it titled like this is his report. When I asked him about it, he said, "Well, no, like that data doesn't give me what I need. I haven't looked
Mm.
at that in months." Well, have you told the people who are no, I never thought about it. So I mean, there's so much data. When you
Yeah.
can really take a step back and say, okay, why? What is the purpose and why are we looking at it? It is very easy, especially in this industry, to look at just 100,000 different metrics. It's who's the builder, what's the labor for this builder, what's the specific material for this builder, how many hours are working, are we including drive time, are we not including drive time, is this covered under warranty, do we need to track this metric? So I mean, there's, I've got at least 62 different tabs open on my computer at any time with different things. We have to be able to take a step back and say, okay, if we do X, the outcome will be Y, and all of these other metrics will take care of itself. But one of the big wins I'll say we really got a couple months ago was putting our operational teams. So internal operations and field operations, scheduling and logistics, and getting them all in the room for their own L10, their own leadership meeting every week. And that has just unblocked so much nonsense of someone saying, well, hey, I do this report. Does anybody use that anymore?
Yeah.
Nope. So it's now we can lower from a company standpoint. Just we don't need to have 130 people. We can really operate with 110, 115. We can get more output because we're giving people more. Hey, here's the clarity on what you need to do, and here's why. And man, when you can do that, it's like you remove those kind of roadblocks, and the right people who are right for your organization will grab onto that and they will run with it.
Yeah, that why is a big deal because there's a lot of folks, if you don't understand how your work fits into the organization, like if you are just running certain reports and handing them off, why are we running these reports? Maybe there's a better way I can do this or faster if I knew what this is impacting.
That's right.
Or if you're doing work that no one looks at, like that is a big demotivator. Like if you're like, wait, you just had me spend all day doing something that is getting tossed.
Yeah,
Like they'd be like, I'm just gonna look for another job. This is embarrassing. This is bad.
They didn't even know about it, and I came across it by accident where I was looking for a month to date, just a month to date revenue number, and when I looked at it, it included 2 days in the future, and I said, well, how is it month to date if it's 2 days in the future? And ultimately where we got to was, this is what we've always done. So if you're familiar with EOS, you know about the sacred cow and all of the different animals. So the sacred cow, I mean, we use that thing at least 2 or 3 times a day. Anytime I hear, well, we've always done it that way. Okay, well, stop. Because the way we've always done it, it hasn't worked. I took over one of the reporting functions this summer because I was really trying to get into the weeds of, okay, why do we look at this? What does this mean? Are we looking at it the right way? And the report was for our field managers, who I would say are probably one of the most important roles in the organization because they're responsible for taking the vision from the leadership team and executing it down to the team that is actually going out and doing the landscaping and laying the sod and doing all the work. And I was probably updating it for probably 2 or 3 weeks in a row, went into a meeting with them all to get some feedback, and not one of them had looked at it. And I thought, man, like, this sucks, right? Just from like, I spent tons of time doing it, but then in my head, it's like, okay, I haven't done a good job as their leader of communicating why this is out there, and why I need it. So it's anytime we've gotten frustrated, I'll say this is really where our founder is really good at any time the conversation starts going sideways about, hey, you're not doing X, Y, and Z. It's like, no. Like, we got to put that mirror up. And, it's probably, on average, I probably make, 2, 3, 4 wrong decisions every week. But at the end of the day, we're going to make a decision. We're going to learn from it. And then we're going to implement something that gets us to where we're good. We're moving forward with the right data. So, again, it's been a giant bowl of spaghetti to kind of get us moving, but it's a little win at a time. And that's all you can do.
Yeah, well, that's so true. I mean, everything is always changing. Everything is always evolving. And, not that I'm a planner. I can't even, but there's a certain point where it's like you can't plan. Let's put in processes. Let's figure out what we want to do and monitor and see and then adjust and plan what's next.
Yep.
I mean, you need a framework, but you can't, because things change. You can't commit to doing one thing because business conditions change, staff changes, world changes,
Sure.
everything changes. You can't really know. So that's kind of important. important to
Yeah.
keep in
And
mind
those
to not get a little
processes
carried away.
are, I mean, the processes I think are a huge part of it as well, where
Yeah.
if it's not documented, where if your scheduling person, if they want to go out on vacation, which again, everybody is in tune, everybody should be going on their vacations. You have to be able to disconnect. I've always just how my brain is wired is I've never been the one who likes to put the away message because I always think, well, I got to be able to be there if someone needs me. And again, it's something our founder, Mike, is very passionate about. Where if you're on PTO, put your away message up and go away. Make
Yeah.
sure you've set the stage if somebody needs something covered. But when you go away, he wants you to be able to disconnect. And what we found over the first couple months when I started, and even now to this point, is a lot of the processes are just in people's heads of how they've always done it.
Yeah.
So if we have someone who, if someone wins the lottery or someone decides, hey, I'm out of here, like we're going to have a hard time filling some of these roles
Yeah.
because we don't have it documented anywhere. So being able to put those steps in place and have a plan for, okay, this month I need to get this process documented. Where are they all going to live? And I mean, that's such a big part of it, where at any point, if you have a new person coming in and you can't hand them a notebook or
Yeah.
a PDF file that says, this is how you do your job and this is what's expected, you're missing the boat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you need to set those proper expectations because otherwise your team doesn't know. You could have three people in the same role, and if they're working in different offices or, they're working remotely, they could be doing three exact different things, you know, may or may not get the same outcome, or they could be doing in different ways more or less efficiently. And so you could have someone who is doing something and knocking it out in 30 minutes where someone else is just wasting their entire workday grinding away. And again, dissatisfaction, like,
Yeah.
God, can you imagine? Like, you just like, oh my gosh, I spent all week looking at this and you're, working on this and your colleague's like, oh, it took me an hour. Like,
Yes. And
like,
that's
oh, you just do it like this. And it's
when
like,
when departments are siloed, it's hard to even get to that level of where do you start to
yeah,
have that conversation. And again, and for us, it was, I started in December. We didn't get kind of an operational LTEM put together. It was until this summer, so maybe
yeah,
July or August. So it was 7 months of just trying to understand, hey, why do you do it this way? Well, I don't know. We've always done it. Okay, that's not the right answer, but let's break down why. Well, I do it this way because of this person. Well, if you go talk to that person, it's something completely different. And if you look at how we're tracking the data versus what the field needs,
yeah,
we learned just a week ago that the field team couldn't open up a file that the internal team was sending simply because they're on their phone, not their computer. So the field team is trying to look through all this stuff on their phone that they can't do and they can't open it and it shuts it down. But they never communicated. All they did was complain about it. But now they have an
mhm,
outlet to bring issues to the internal operations team. So,
yeah,
but again, it took us 7 months just for the light bulb to go off to say, hey, I need to get you 8 people in a room together to talk about these issues. And I think that is trial by error. And I think that is probably one of the most frustrating and challenging things of being in any leadership role. It is
mhm,
that mentality of I am going to try 100 things and they're not going to work, but on 101, maybe it's going to work.
mhm,
Maybe it's not. And that's just that has been this year kind of in a nutshell is, okay, this worked. This didn't work. This didn't work. This didn't work. This didn't work. Okay. Ooh, little win right here. And then you go through all the normal business stuff of trying to figure out the cost and are we spending our time with the right
yeah,
people? And then you get into the external factors in this industry, like the weather, and if it's raining, you can't send landscaping crews out. So, it's a lot, but I think if you have a plan and all right, I got to get this win today, then that helps you really keep moving.
So I like that. I've enjoyed this chat. It's time to wrap it up though. So my question for you is I always kind of like to end the episode. If you had like when it comes to human resources, handling being good, doing good by your people, proper people ops, anything like that, what is like a final idea or a tip or a call to action you want to leave for everybody?
when it comes to people, um, don't take your people for granted. And the reason I say that is, when you get into an organization, again, large organizations are going to be harder because there's multiple levels. But when I see what has happened to the culture and the productivity of just one department, where if you would have talked to the leaders who are in that role prior to this, the sky is always falling and there's so much to do and we don't have enough time to do it. And after we exited those people, the culture is better. Like like you can taste it. It is palpable when you were in the office. And the productivity is, one of the guys who was still there, who was, 2 or 3 levels down from the executive. I had asked him for something on, it was like Thursday at like 3:00, and I'd asked him for a report. In my head, knowing my experience, I was assuming like by the end of next week, I'll get it. His response was, "Hey, I can't get it to you by the end of the day." Keeping in mind this was 3:00 in the afternoon, he said, "But I'll have it to you by tomorrow." So I think when I say don't take your people for granted, it's not just your people, but it's, are they in the right seats? Depending on how many layers you have, are you having skip level meetings? So, we have kind of our C-suite right now, and then we have kind of VPs and directors. So are you spending time with people who are not reporting to you, and really sitting down and understanding, are they happy? If you're not, I know everybody says they have, an open door policy and, hey, come talk to me if you have questions. And we do the same, but I don't think it's that easy. So really trying to create that environment of, hey, like, I want you to be here because you want to be here. And that conversation can always come off as, well, if you're not happy, I'm going to fire you or go find another job. So, I always kind of explain to our team, we're all on the same bus. Right? If you are great people, there will be a place for you on this bus. Maybe you're not happy in your current seat. Let's find you another seat. We've shifted some people in seats all around, right? Lateral moves, moving up, moving down. And there's other people who where the bus is headed now is different than where it was 12 months ago. And that's okay. Things change. And if you're not okay with that, then this isn't the right opportunity for you anymore. So, people is such an important part. And I think having that head of HR, again, it's, we brought on our chief people officer probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and it has been life-changing to work with her. She's an absolute rock star. And, she really focuses on getting to that point where people can be open and honest and not feel like, well, if I say I'm not happy, am I going to get canned? So I think that would be kind of, really focus on your people. And sometimes there are people who are earlier in their career who can do some pretty amazing things if they have the right leadership, versus a leader over them who is holding everything close to the chest for fear of, well, if I tell you, you're going to take my job. So, and I think that's important.
I think that's a great way to close things out. So, before I say goodbye to everyone, Dave, where can people stalk you and or your organization online?
Find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Again, the company is Loving, pretty easy to remember. We're based out of Charlotte. Would love to connect with, with anyone and everyone who likes to chat business and leadership, and just kind of at the end of the day, help making the world a better place.
I like that. Maybe I will start harassing you online. So
please do.
I probably will. So anyway, great conversation, great episode. Everyone who is watching or listening, thank you so much for joining us today for MustardHub Voices from the Frontlines. Please like, share, comment, do all that kind of good stuff to get this episode out there to people that may get some really, really good advice from listening to Dave. Also, go to mustardhub.com, check us out, and sign up for free while you are there. Thank you so much. Till next time.